They say every trucker has one run that never leaves his soul, the one that burns itself into your bones. Mine started with a deal I should have never taken, a trailer full of chemicals I wasn't supposed to ask about, and a voice on the radio that whispered my name before I'd even said a word. By the time I hit the Arizona line, the night was alive. The mirrors were glowing, my fuel was leaking fire, and someone was following me who didn't show up in the headlights. I thought I'd seen everything in 30 years behind the wheel. I was wrong. You think you know what fear feels like? Wait until your rig starts burning and the only voice left in the static is your son's. The one who hasn't spoken to you in a decade. Don't blink, don't skip. Because before this ride is over, you'll find out what really burned that night on Route 66. Hit that like, subscribe, and stay with me to the end, if you've got the guts to hear how the fire run really happened. Texas bled into the sky like a cut you didn't notice until it soaked the sleeve. The sun sank over the refinery stacks east of Houston, turning the air the color of cheap bourbon. Mike Dalton watched it through a chipped windshield, the glass latticed with a spider crack that had somehow dodged inspection twice. His Freightliner coughed once, twice, and then settled into the low idle that rattled the coffee in his cup holder. He patted the dash the way a man might calm a jittery horse. "Easy, girl," he said. "We're not done yet." The truck stop sat off a frontage road near Baytown, a fluorescent island ringed by diesel pumps and a convenience store that smelled like burnt hot dogs and citrus cleaner. The sign promised showers, Wi-Fi, and hope in block letters that flickered whenever a coastal gust hit the transformer. Mike's shadow stretched long along the oil-slicked concrete, thin as a prayer. He was 52, and it showed. The sun had chewed at his skin for decades. The weight of long miles sat in the webbing at the corners of his eyes. A beard the color of road salt shadowed his jaw. When he took a sip of truck stop coffee, thick enough to bruise a spoon, his hands trembled just barely, an engine misfire he ignored. On the dash, tucked into the visor, a sun-faded photo of a boy grinned at a Little League trophy. The smile was all possibility. The edges were curled to the color of corn husk. Mike had not looked straight at that picture in years. He kept it there like a roadside cross you pass without stopping. He had been driving since before the first divorce, since before the second mortgage, since before the kind of debt that sleeps beside you and counts your heartbeats. He had put Texas and Oklahoma and New Mexico under his wheels so many times, the interstates felt like veins. When the dispatcher called with loads, Mike took them. When there were no calls, he took whatever would keep the transmission from seizing and the bank from calling. He told himself it was just a season. Seasons lengthen when you're not watching. He clambered down and stretched his back until he felt something pop in a way that didn't entirely hurt. The evening smelled like hot rubber and salt coming off the Gulf. Somewhere, a dog barked at nothing. On lane 4, a teenager in a reflective vest fought with a squeegee and lost. The boy's breath fogged in the humid dusk. His cheeks had the anxious pink of someone still new to awkward work. He glanced at the Freightliner as if it might bite. Mike checked the lines, the air valves, the scabbed-over places on the trailer where someone had patched sheet metal with faith and rivets. He ran a finger under a coupling and came away with dust and the faint shine of something that was not dust. He sniffed it, a mechanic's reflex, then shrugged. Diesel had been a part of his scent the way cedar smoke gets into a hunting jacket. Permanent, unbothered by soap. He wiped his hand on his jeans and told himself not to borrow trouble from a sky that had not finished paying out the sunset. The phone buzzed in his pocket. He let it buzz again, a small rebellion, and then answered anyway. "Dalton," he said. "Evening, Road King," came the voice. Dispatch, Earl from San Antonio, whistle always in his throat, like a man who'd swallowed a harmonica reed. I got something hot, and by hot, I mean scorching. You parked? Mike looked at the neon reflection trembling in the chrome of the fuel tank. I'm listening. Pick up in Channelview. Hazardous but boxed and blessed. Destination Vegas, outskirts. Clock starts when you sign. Delivery within 18 hours. He repeated the words in his head until they settled into something that felt ridiculous and possible at the same time. Houston to Las Vegas in less than a day. If the wind kissed your bumper, if the way stations blinked as you passed, if the angels on the shoulder leaned you green all the way across. He imagined the map as a taut string, north a whisper to catch Interstate 10, then westward hunger, then the notch of Interstate 20, then the long memory of Interstate 40 that ran like a scar across the middle of the country. He had done versions of it. He had not done it under a clock that mean. Pay? Mike asked. Double, Earl said, like a magician revealing a dove. No haggling. Sign now, roll now, extra for night hours. You get there on time, they'll tack on a thank you the size of a used pickup. Double. The word loosened something in Mike's chest he had cinched tight for months. Double could turn late into not late. Double could buy down interest. Double could quiet the calls for a while. He pictured envelopes stacked on his tiny kitchen table, the ones with windows that showed barcodes like teeth. He pictured getting home to a stack a little thinner. What's in the box? Mike asked. Because you ask. Chem reagents, Earl answered. Lab stuff. It's all papered. Hazmat certified. Keep it locked. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Client doesn't like the daylight. That's why your clock is sunset to lunchtime tomorrow. Whose lab? Earl made a sound that could have been static and could have been reluctance. A company with more lawyers than forklifts. You know how it goes. They want it there. They want it quiet. They'll love you for it if you get it done. And you will, because you're stubborn and the truck is uglier than sin, but blessed by the devil. Mike glanced up through the windshield at the sun, limping behind the refinery stacks. 18 hours. 18 meant no long breaks, no second helpings of coffee unless you drank them through red lights. It meant stripping the run down to the bones and trusting the bones. He could say no. He could walk into the convenience store, buy a greasy burrito, and sleep in the back until the sky went purple again. He could. The thought slid off him like water off wax. You know I'll do it, he said. I figured, Earl said, relief loosening his voice. Texting you the pickup coordinates, Channelview Yard, sign the manifest, check the seals, kiss your guardian angel, then put her in the wind. I'll keep the line open. You need anything, you hunk. The line went quiet. Mike stood there a second longer, letting the night lay its hand on his shoulders. The teenage squeegee boy worked lane 5 now, his motions oddly priestly, blessing windshields with streaks. A woman in a ball cap argued on speakerphone near the ice freezer, her words snipped by the chirr of cicadas. A pair of veterans of too many miles compared tire prices with a tenderness that would have surprised them if you had named it love. The world went on in its ordinary ways. Somewhere inside that world, a clock had started. He filled the tanks until the pump clunked, and then squeezed a few more gulps in, the way he always did, trying to bottle a little luck. He checked the pressure in the tires by kicking them, a ritual more about trust than data. He ducked inside the convenience store, bought jerky thick as bark, a bag of salted peanuts, and coffee that tasted like nights he couldn't remember. At the register, a girl with a nose ring scanned the items without looking up. Long ride? She asked, because that was what you say to men who look like road maps. Long enough, he said. Safe travels, she said, and he felt it like a blessing from a church he had not attended in 2 decades. Back in the cab, he slid into the driver's seat and felt the familiar ache in his hips. The Freightliner coughed again, then found its voice. He touched the visor. The photo rattled a little. "Still with me?" he whispered to the boy, frozen in time. It was the first full sentence he had said to the picture in a decade. He did not look long enough to tally the years that had piled up between past and present. He pressed the clutch, slipped into gear, and let the truck roll. The pickup yard in Channelview sat behind a chain-link fence crowned with concertina wire that caught the last light and threw it back in cold coils. A night clerk with eyes like polished pennies took Mike's license, wrote down numbers slowly as if committing a spell, and handed over a clipboard with papers that had signatures layered like sedimentary rock. "You're the last pickup," the clerk said. "You're bound for Nevada." "Vegas," Mike said, as if speaking the name might make the miles shorter. "Luck to you," the clerk said, which was the right phrase for that city no matter what crossed your axles. The trailer waited in the far corner, its sides unmarked, its placards shouting hazard in bright diamonds. Mike walked around it, counting breaths, counting chain links, counting the small clinks that tell you whether a lock will hold. He thumbed the seals, read the codes aloud in a whisper, then tugged at the valves, at the hinges, at anything that could betray him at 60 miles an hour. The metal was cool to the touch. The air hummed with insects and the distant, endless hum of interstate. He climbed back into the cab, signed the manifest with a slow hand, and watched as the clerk tore off the top sheet and tucked it into a folder with the care of a librarian. When the gate slid open, it did so grudgingly, as if letting him out was a personal favor. On the way out, he caught his reflection in the office window, a man in a brimmed cap, a man made of road and resolve, a man whose best joke was that he kept going. He eased onto the frontage road and then into the river of traffic, where headlights flowed like fish scales in the dark. He felt the weight of the trailer kiss the hitch and settle. He listened for a sound that would tell him what he was pulling other than paperwork and caution. The interstate took him the way a story takes a listener. He merged, he accelerated. He became one more point of light unspooling west. The radio found a station that played old country, the kind recorded in rooms that smelled like cigarettes and honest fear. A pedal steel wept. A voice sang about leaving and not meaning it. Mike's mouth-shaped words he had not rehearsed in years. Out beyond the glow, the prairie flattened into darkness. The sky wiped itself clean of the day and showed stars. The Freightliner steadied in its lane, humming the note of a working thing. He checked the mirrors, habit, reverence, and saw his trailer, square and sober, following like a promise he intended to keep. His pulse settled. The clock did not. He thought of nothing and then everything. He thought of the phone calls he had ignored out of stubbornness and then out of habit. He thought of anniversaries he had missed, of gifts mailed late with notes that were half apology, half weather report. He thought of a boy stepping to a plate, bat too heavy, feet too eager, and how he had promised to be there next time. He thought of next times accumulating like miles. A highway sign flashed by, westbound lanes, and names he knew by the feel of the wheel when you hit the on-ramp. Somewhere ahead, desert waited with its beautiful indifference. Somewhere at the far edge, a city in the sand sparkled the way lies sparkle before they fail. He tightened his grip on the wheel and felt the ancient leather bite his palm. The run had begun. The road accepted him without ceremony. Behind the glass, the photo of the boy watched the man in the mirror watch the night. And out there, just past the reach of the Freightliner's high beams, the first dark questions lined up like mile markers, quiet and patient, waiting for their turn. The Texas night had a way of folding around you, soft as smoke, but heavy with silence. Mike drove into it like a man chasing ghosts. The highway ribboned west, cut through oil towns asleep under sodium lamps, their refineries breathing fire into the dark. In his rear view, the trailer's hazard placards glimmered red and gold. Little warning flags fluttering on the edge of reason. The Freightliner hummed steady, an old beast that had learned every rattle by heart. The dash light flickered every few miles, an electrical tick Mike had stopped bothering to fix. The steering wheel, smooth from years of sweat and sun, felt like the only thing in his life that hadn't left him. On the passenger seat lay his world. A thermos of coffee gone cold, a half-eaten packet of jerky, and an envelope he hadn't opened yet. It was from his ex-wife, Karen, postmarked a week ago from somewhere in Colorado. He had tossed it aside when he first saw it, the way you swat a wasp and pretend it's gone. But now, with the road stretching endless ahead, the envelope called to him. He reached over, tore it open along the seam, and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. Her handwriting, sharp, slanted, the kind that cut clean, brought back 1,000 small memories. Grocery lists, notes on the fridge. Back soon. Don't forget Jason's game. We need to talk. He read, Mike, I wouldn't be writing if it wasn't serious. Jason's sick. It's not something small. The doctors say it's complicated, and it's been getting worse. He's too proud to ask, but he needs you. I know it's been years, and I know you think he hates you. But he doesn't. Not really. He's just hurt. We both are. If there's anything left in you that still cares, call him. Karen. The words didn't hit all at once. They crept under his ribs, settled somewhere behind his heart, and then began to burn. Jason. His boy. The name felt foreign in his mouth now. 10 years of silence had turned it into something half-remembered. He tried to picture his son not as the boy in the photo, but as a man, grown, with a voice, a life. But his mind refused. It only showed that one frozen moment. The kid grinning beside a dusty baseball diamond, sunlight turning his hair the color of rust. Mike folded the letter carefully and slid it into the visor next to the photo. He couldn't throw it away. Couldn't face it either. Damn, he muttered, his voice breaking the hum of the cab. You really waited till now, huh? The radio crackled with static before finding a station halfway through an old George Strait song. Amarillo by Mornin', up from San Antone. He almost laughed. The irony was cruel and perfect. He turned it up anyway. Outside, the night thickened into the kind of black you only see between towns. The headlights carved a tunnel through it. Everything else might as well not exist. The road was empty, but Mike felt watched. Every now and then, a flash of distant light caught in his mirror. Maybe another truck, maybe a set of high beams too far back to tell. He rubbed his eyes. You're seeing things, old man, he said, but didn't sound convinced. At 2 hours past midnight, he pulled off at a rest stop outside Abilene. A line of idling semis stood shoulder to shoulder like sleeping animals. He parked at the far edge, engine still running, and stepped out. The air was cooler, carrying that sweet scent of dust and sage. He stretched, rolled his shoulders, and looked at the stars. 1,000 cold fires staring right back. He reached for the glove compartment, found his burner phone, and turned it on. No signal. Typical. Still, he scrolled through the contacts, thumb hovering over a name that hadn't seen light in a decade. Jason Dalton. The number might not even work anymore. Maybe his son had changed it, blocked it, buried it the same way Mike buried memories behind endless miles. But the thought of that letter, of sick and complicated, made his chest tighten. He almost pressed call. Almost. Instead, he locked the phone, tossed it back into the compartment, and slammed it shut. Not yet. He'd do it after this run, after Vegas, after he'd made the money to send. It would mean something then. He could say, "See, kid, I still did right." He climbed back into the cab and checked his mirrors again. The same dark stretch of highway behind him. Except now, one pair of headlights glowed far off, steady, keeping pace. He frowned. Coincidence, probably. He'd been followed before, bored cops, curious rookies, other truckers with too much caffeine. Nothing new. But there was something about the rhythm of those lights that felt deliberate, measured. Mike shifted gears and pulled back onto the road, easing into the flow. The headlights behind did the same. "All right," he murmured. "If you're playing tag, you better be ready to lose." The Freightliner roared, the engine's growl rolling across the flat Texas land. Mike grinned despite himself, the first real grin in days, and punched the accelerator. The speedometer climbed. The truck behind tried to match pace, but began to fall away, swallowed by distance and darkness. For a while, all was right. The highway sang, the tires hummed, and the wind curled through the cracked window like a familiar ghost. He lit a cigarette, something he'd promised to quit 5 years ago, and exhaled slow. Smoke coiled toward the ceiling. He whispered, "Hang in there, kid," though he wasn't sure if he meant Jason or himself. The road opened ahead, a long silver thread disappearing into the desert heart of the night. And somewhere behind, that same pair of headlights reappeared on the horizon, silent, steady, waiting. By dawn, the world had turned to gold and grit. The Texas sky was a furnace, and the horizon shimmered like it was holding its breath. Mike had been driving through the night, eyes dry, brain running on caffeine and muscle memory. The Freightliner's old engine sang the same 3 notes over and over. The kind of song that kept you sane until it didn't. Somewhere west of Amarillo, he pulled into a way station that looked like it hadn't been painted since Reagan was president. The air buzzed with flies and heat. A few truckers lingered outside, leaning against bumpers, swapping stories that smelled of diesel and exaggeration. Inside the small office, the air conditioner groaned but didn't cool much. A TV in the corner played local news with the sound off. Just images of sun-scorched fields and another gas explosion somewhere down in Odessa. Behind the counter sat a dispatcher Mike hadn't seen in a while, a man named Carl Shorty Whitman, who wasn't short at all. 6'4", bald, and chewing sunflower seeds like a religion. "Well, look who the road dragged in," Shorty said, flashing a grin with one gold tooth. "If it ain't Mike Dalton, king of the busted clutch." Mike handed over his manifest. "Still standing, Shorty. Can't say the same for your decor." Shorty chuckled, flicking through the papers. "You still running for Earl?" "Yeah. Figures. He's the only one dumb enough to keep you in rotation." Shorty's grin faded when his eyes landed on the document stamp. He tapped the line marked Hazmat Class 8, Corrosive Substances, and gave Mike a long, slow look. "Chemical freight, huh? Where's it headed?" "Vegas?" Shorty leaned back, spitting a seed hull into an empty coffee cup. "That's a hell of a long haul for a rush job." Mike shrugged. "Pays double. Always does, when the cargo can eat through your bones." There was something in his tone. Not quite a joke, not quite a warning. Shorty lowered his voice. Word around the yard is, this run wasn't supposed to go to a freelancer. It's corporate freight, experimental stuff. Came out of one of them Black Label labs down by the ship channel. Mike frowned. What kind of lab? Shorty hesitated, then whispered, the kind that doesn't put their name on the bill of lading. Mike chuckled, trying to play it off, but something cold slid under his ribs. So what, you think I'm hauling something illegal? Illegal? Shorty said, snorting. Nah, dangerous, that's another story. Whatever's in there, don't open that trailer for nobody. Don't stop unless you gotta. And if someone starts asking questions... He leaned closer. You never saw me, all right? Mike pocketed his papers and turned to leave. Outside, the day was already burning. He checked the chains, walked the length of the trailer, and listened. Sometimes, heavy freight had a sound, a slow slosh or low hum. But this one was silent. Too silent. When he climbed back into the cab, he caught movement in the mirror. A black SUV, parked 2 lots over. Windows tinted darker than law allowed. It hadn't been there when he arrived. He fired up the engine, trying not to look like he was looking. The SUV didn't move, just sat there, engine idling. He eased back onto the road, merged west, and glanced in the mirror again. The SUV followed. At first, he told himself it was coincidence. The interstate was full of vehicles going the same way, delivery vans, tourists, other truckers. But after 20 miles, then 30, then 40, the black SUV was still there, keeping perfect distance. He pushed the speed a notch higher. The SUV did the same. All right, he muttered. We're doing this. He switched lanes twice, dropped behind a tanker, then gunned past an RV. The Freightliner rattled, but she held strong. When he checked again, the SUV was still there, steady as a metronome. Mike's pulse started to match the rhythm of the tires. Who the hell are you? He thought about Shorty's warning, about Black Label labs, and don't open the trailer. He'd been hauling freight for 30 years, fertilizer, gas, even live cargo once. But he'd never been followed. The miles rolled under his wheels like time he couldn't get back. Finally, after a long stretch of desert 2-lane outside Tucumcari, he saw a truck stop ahead, one of those dusty, sun-bleached places that hadn't changed since the 70s. He swung off the highway, the tires crunching over gravel, and pulled alongside the pumps. The SUV kept going, gliding past on the main road without slowing. Mike waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, nothing. The road was empty again. He exhaled, slow. Maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe the highway ghosts were just playing tricks. Inside the truck stop, the air smelled like bacon grease and kerosene. A radio played Merle Haggard, and the loan attendant behind the counter, an old man in suspenders, looked up and grinned. Coffee's on the house if you tell me a good story, he said. Mike smiled weakly. Only stories I got ain't fit for daylight. He filled his thermos anyway, grabbed a candy bar, and lingered by the window. Outside, the sun hung low and cruel over the desert, painting everything the color of rust and regret. The attendant followed his gaze. You hauling for someone's special friend? Mike shrugged. Just a load. Vegas run. The old man nodded slowly, eyes narrowing at the trailer. You be careful with that kind of cargo. Sometimes what's inside weighs more than the truck. Mike turned, surprised. You sound like you know something about that. The man smiled, thin and tired. I've been watching men drive themselves to hell on this highway for 40 years. Some of them carry boxes, some carry ghosts. Hard to tell which burns hotter when things go wrong. Mike left a few bills on the counter and stepped back into the light. His reflection in the windshield looked like someone else's face, tired, hollowed out by miles and time. He climbed into the cab and sat there a while, watching the horizon. A wind kicked up, pushing dust across the empty pumps, whispering through the cracks of the freight liner's door seals. Then, just before he started the engine, a sound, faint but sharp, crackled through the CB radio. "Keep rolling, Dalton." He froze. The voice was metallic, distant. He didn't recognize it. The radio shouldn't even have been on that channel. "Who is this?" he said. No answer. Just static, then silence. He checked the mirror again. And there it was, the black SUV, parked on the far side of the highway now, engine idling, facing him. Mike swallowed hard, shifted into gear, and eased back onto the road. Whatever this haul was, it wasn't just freight anymore. It was bait. By the time the Texas line fell behind him, the sky had turned white with heat. Arizona didn't welcome you. It dared you to keep going. The desert stretched endless in every direction, a red and gold wasteland under a sun that felt angry. Mike Dalton's Freightliner roared west along the ghost bones of Route 66, the old highway running parallel to the new. Asphalt shimmered like spilled mercury. Every few miles, wind tore through the cab, bringing with it dust that tasted like metal and old dreams. The radio was dead. Just static and a faint hum that rose and fell like breathing. He'd been driving 12 hours straight now. 12 hours of the same engine note, the same horizon that never seemed to move. The black SUV hadn't shown again since Tucumcari, but that didn't mean much. Mike had learned long ago that trouble didn't need headlights to follow you. His throat was dry, his tongue sticking to the roof of his mouth. The coffee was gone. He needed fuel, for both man and machine. When a faded sign appeared on the roadside, "Eddie's Pit Stop, Gas and Groceries, 3 miles," he almost laughed out loud. The letters were peeling, the arrow bent, but it might as well have been a lighthouse. The station sat off a cracked stretch of 2-lane, surrounded by scrub and silence. A single pump stood crooked under a tin awning. The store itself looked like it hadn't sold anything newer than 1985. Faded Coca-Cola sign, dusty windows, an old Route 66 mural chipped from sun and time. Mike pulled in slow, the Freightliner's brakes sighing like tired lungs. When he killed the engine, the sudden quiet roared in his ears. He climbed down, wiped his face with a rag, and looked around. No other cars. Just wind and heat. From the doorway emerged a man who looked older than the desert itself. Skin darkened by decades of sun, white beard down to his chest, eyes hidden behind scratched aviator glasses. He wore a grease-stained mechanic's shirt with the name Eddie stitched in red. "You look half dead, friend," Eddie said, voice rough as gravel. "Gas or resurrection?" Mike cracked a grin. "Start with the gas. Resurrection comes later." Eddie chuckled and nodded toward the pump. "That machine's older than sin, but she still spits fire. Diesel's on the right." As Mike filled the tanks, the pump clattered and whined like it was complaining. The numbers rolled slow. He could smell the heat coming off the hood, the faint tang of oil and rubber. Eddie leaned against the doorway, watching the trailer. "That's a heavy hauler you got there. You pulling liquid?" Mike hesitated. "Chemicals, Vegas delivery, time sensitive." Eddie's expression didn't change, but his hand paused mid-swipe on the rag he carried. "Chemicals, huh? Dangerous kind?" "Hazmat certified." Eddie nodded, though something in his posture stiffened. You mind an old man's advice? Depends on how free it is. It's free as sunlight. Don't carry that kind of cargo through the desert at night. Heat messes with everything. Metal, pressure, even luck. And this stretch? He pointed east, then west. She's cursed. Always has been. You see the hills out there? Used to be a refinery back in the 50s. Blue sky high. Folks still find glass in the sand. Mike chuckled. You trying to spook me, old-timer? Eddie smiled thinly. You're already spooked, I can tell. You check your mirrors more than your gauges. Mike froze. Eddie went on, voice quiet now. Whatever's back there, it ain't done following you. Maybe it's a man, maybe it's your past. Makes no difference. Out here, both bite the same. The pump clicked off. Diesel dripped from the nozzle onto the hot dirt and sizzled like rain on a skillet. Mike replaced the cap, trying to shake off the unease. I appreciate the sermon, Padre, but I've got miles to burn. Eddie shrugged. Suit yourself. But if something starts to burn for real, don't stop here. Keep going until you hit the dry lake bed past Kingman. That's the only place where fire can't find a meal. Mike gave a polite nod, climbed back into the cab, and fired up the Freightliner. As he rolled away, he glanced in the mirror. Eddie still stood in the doorway, watching him go, motionless as a statue. The next 100 miles were a blur of sand, asphalt, and memory. He couldn't shake the image of that old man's face, or the words. Don't carry that kind of cargo through the desert at night. But it was already night now. The sun sank into the red dust hills behind him, and the sky turned copper, then black. The temperature dropped fast, leaving the world cold and brittle. Mike turned on the headlights, and the beam cut through the dark like a blade. That was when he smelled it, faint at first, then stronger. Gasoline. He frowned, checked the gauges. Everything normal. Pressure steady, fuel fine. He cracked the window. The smell grew sharper. Then he saw it. A thin shimmer trailing behind the trailer, visible only when the lights caught the dust just right. Fuel. Leaking. Damn it, he hissed. He flipped on the hazards, slowed, and checked the side mirror. The leak was real. A slow, steady drip from the rear line, painting the road silver. His hands tightened on the wheel. Stopping meant delay. Stopping meant risk. But not stopping meant fire. Before he could decide, the CB radio crackled to life again. The same metallic voice as before. Don't stop, Dalton. Mike's blood went cold. Who the hell is this? He barked into the mic. You been tracking me? You messing with my radio? Static. Then faintly, almost like a whisper. Keep rolling. And then silence. Mike's heart hammered, his palms slick on the wheel. He looked out into the desert, saw only black. But for the first time that night, he realized something terrifying. The silence out there wasn't empty. It was waiting. He pressed his foot down on the accelerator, the Freightliner roaring forward into the dark, the trailer bleeding fuel behind him, the wind carrying the smell of danger. Out there on Route 66, beneath the stars that watched everything and judged nothing, Mike Dalton began his descent into the fire. By the time the clock on the dash read 1:42, or rather, by the time it would have if the clock still worked, the desert had swallowed the world whole. No lights, no signs, no sound except the Freightliner's steady roar and the whisper of leaking fuel tracing a deadly thread behind him. The smell inside the cab had changed. It wasn't just diesel anymore. It was sharper, raw, chemical. Mike cracked the window and gagged as the desert wind blew through. Somewhere deep down, an animal part of his brain whispered the truth he didn't want to hear. Something was about to catch fire, He glanced at the side mirror, a reflex now. The shimmer of leaking fuel still trailed like a ghostly ribbon. But what froze him wasn't the leak. It was a flicker of light, far back down the road. Headlights. Again, the black SUV. Mike's throat went dry. He switched the CB to a random channel, thumbed the mic. "Whoever's out there, you'd better back off. I'm hauling hazmat. You get too close, and you're asking to die with me." Only static answered. He gritted his teeth and kept driving. The miles blurred, his body running on autopilot. A machine piloting a machine. The desert rose and fell in soft waves of sand and stone, and the stars hung overhead like nails pinning the night in place. He reached for the coffee, but it was gone. He reached for another cigarette, lit it, and the tiny flame of the lighter flickered, too close to the fumes. He froze, then snapped it shut fast. "Jesus Christ, Mike," he muttered. "You trying to end the story early?" A dry chuckle escaped him, but it didn't last long. Something hit the side of the trailer, hard. The whole rig lurched to the right, tires screaming against asphalt. Mike slammed the brakes halfway, steadying the wheel, eyes snapping to the mirror. The SUV had closed in, fast, too fast. Its high beam stabbed into his mirrors, white and blinding. He shouted into the CB again, "Back off! You'll blow us both to hell." Still nothing. The SUV rammed him again, harder this time, hitting the back corner of the trailer. Sparks burst from the contact, scattering in the darkness like fireflies. But he knew they weren't harmless. One spark, just one, could turn the leaking fuel into a fuse. Mike floored it. The Freightliner roared in protest, the old engine screaming like it was begging him to stop. But the truck surged forward, climbing in speed. The SUV stayed close. "All right," Mike growled, gripping the wheel tight. "You want to dance? Fine." He swung the rig left, forcing the trailer into the other lane. The SUV swerved to avoid it, fishtailing on the shoulder before falling back into line. Mike used the moment to pull away, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the radio static. Then, a flash. A sudden streak of light in the side mirror. For half a second, the desert lit up like noon. White, violent, absolute. Lightning. It struck somewhere behind him, close enough that he felt the vibration through the steering column. The thunder came a heartbeat later, deep and heavy. He glanced up and realized the stars were gone. The sky had turned black and swollen. A storm. Out here, where it hadn't rained in weeks. Wind rose hard from the east, carrying sand that stung his windshield. The storm hit all at once, rain slapping the glass, lightning forking across the horizon. The world became a blur of motion and noise. Through it all, Mike saw a shape in the mirror. The SUV again, fighting the storm, headlights flickering. Then another flash of lightning hit, closer this time. And in that split second of blinding light, Mike saw the impossible. There was something on the trailer. A shape, a man or something like one, clinging to the back doors, silhouette framed by the sparks of static discharge. Mike's blood turned to ice. He jerked the wheel instinctively, trying to throw it off. The Freightliner swayed dangerously, tires skidding on wet asphalt. He fought it back under control, every muscle screaming. "Get off my damn truck," he yelled, voice hoarse. The storm answered with thunder. Then came the smell, acrid, electric. He glanced back again, and his worst fear unfolded in slow motion. The leaking fuel ignited. A trail of fire bloomed behind the trailer, small at first, then roaring as wind fed it. The desert lit up red and orange, a moving inferno chasing the Freightliner down the highway. Mike's instincts took over. He flipped the differential lock, gunned the engine, and aimed for the old dirt access road cutting off the main highway. The trailer fishtailed as he veered, fire curling up the metal frame. The SUV behind tried to follow, but when the fire reached the puddle of leaked fuel it left on the asphalt, the whole thing went up in a violent bloom. The explosion was silent for half a second, and then the shockwave hit. The Freightliner's mirrors shattered, the cab filled with smoke. Mike coughed, gasping, but didn't stop. Couldn't. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward into the desert, the burning trailer screaming behind him. Every bump threatened to rip the rig apart. Every gust of wind fanned the flames higher. Somewhere in the chaos, the CB crackled again. The same metallic voice, faint through the static. "Dalton, don't let it stop. If it stops, it blows." Mike shouted over the roar. "Who the hell are you?" No answer. Only that one, impossible command echoing through the storm. "Don't stop." The old truck hurtled into the desert dark, dragging its burning heart behind it. The night sky turned orange, the air thick with fire and rain. And Mike Dalton, 52 years old, broke, alone, running from everything he'd ever lost, became the only man in Arizona driving straight through hell with his foot still on the gas. The rain had stopped, but the fire hadn't. It crawled up the trailer walls like something alive, licking at the metal with orange teeth. The smell inside the cab was unbearable. Burning plastic, melting paint, hot steel. Mike Dalton's eyes stung as he squinted through the cracked windshield, knuckles white on the wheel. The Freightliner was a furnace on wheels now. Every time he downshifted, the engine shuddered like it might die, but it didn't. It was as stubborn as the man driving it. The desert rolled by in flashes of red light reflected off the flames. Cacti and sandstone bluffs stood like dark witnesses. Somewhere in that black distance, coyotes howled, but the sound was drowned beneath the roar of fire and the scream of rubber. Mike's radio sputtered again, more static, then a voice, calmer now, closer. "Dalton, you listening?" Mike grabbed the mic with shaking hands. "Who is this? What's in that damn trailer?" Silence. Then the voice again, distorted but urgent. "You're carrying VX catalyst compound. It's unstable in high heat. If it ruptures near a populated area, it'll vaporize in seconds. You stop that truck anywhere near town, you kill thousands." Mike's heart stopped. Jesus, what kind of sick? "You don't have time. Keep it moving. There's an old gravel pit 20 miles west. Latitude 35.394. Longitude 146. The rest cut off in a burst of static. He slammed the mic down. 20 miles. All right, we'll make 20 damn miles. He hit the high beam, peering through the thick haze of smoke. The heat behind him grew so intense he could feel it through the seat, like the devil breathing down his neck. For the first time in his life, Mike Dalton prayed while driving. Not to any god in particular, just to the road itself. The gauges trembled. The temperature needle climbed into the red. Sweat poured down his face. Every breath came with a mouthful of smoke. Somewhere between sanity and instinct, his mind drifted. Images flickered like a film reel. Jason as a kid, standing at home plate, looking toward the bleachers, looking for him. The empty seat, the way his son's shoulders had slumped when he realized his father wasn't there again. The guilt hit harder than the heat. "Not this time, kid," Mike whispered. "Not again." He coughed until blood flecked his lips, blinked through tears, and kept driving. The highway curved upward into a plateau, the wind stronger now, whipping the fire like a flag. The cab's interior glowed dimly red. Every few seconds, a chunk of burning rubber flew off a tire and vanished into the dark. He was half blind from the smoke when the phone, his cheap burner, started ringing. The sound cut through everything. He stared at the screen. Unknown number. Something deep inside him knew. He thumbed accept. Hello? For a moment, just static. Then a voice, shaky but unmistakable. Dad? Mike almost veered off the road. He gripped the wheel tight, the phone pressed to his ear with trembling fingers. Jason? Yeah. Mom told me about I saw the news, Dad. They said a tanker exploded near Flagstaff. Is that you? Mike swallowed hard. Yeah, kid, that's me. What are you doing out there? You're gonna die. He laughed, a short, broken sound. Trying not to. Got one last job, son. Gotta finish it. You don't have to do this anymore, Dad. Please, just stop. Pull over and... Mike's voice cracked. Can't. If I stop, a lot of people are gonna die. I'm trying to get this thing out to the desert, away from everything. There was silence on the other end. A long one. Then quietly, you always had to fix everything yourself. Mike felt tears mixed with the sweat and soot on his cheeks. Maybe this time I actually can. You think this makes it right? You think this... Jason's voice broke. I just wanted you, Dad. Not the hero. Just you. Mike closed his eyes for half a second, just long enough to let the words stab where they needed to. I know, son. I know. The truck hit a bump. The whole cab jolted. A burst of flame shot past the window. He looked out and saw that the trailer's rear doors were glowing red hot. The paint had peeled away, and black smoke billowed like a storm. The heat was climbing. Fast. He pressed the phone to his ear again. Listen, Jason. I'm gonna make it right. I swear. I'm taking this fire somewhere it can't hurt anyone. Dad. But the line went dead. He tried to call back, but the signal was gone. Just like that. Damn it, he yelled, slamming the dashboard. Not now. The flames reached the coupling. He could hear the pop and hiss of weakening metal. The whole trailer was seconds from becoming a bomb. And then, through the smoke, he saw it. A flicker of light ahead. Not fire this time, but something white. He wiped the soot from his eyes, squinting. And there it was. The gravel pit. It spread wide and hollow under the moonlight. An old mining crater turned to dust bowl. No buildings, no people. Just a hole big enough to bury a nightmare. Mike downshifted, feeling the gears grind. He guided the burning rig off the highway, tires throwing sparks as they bit into the gravel. The pit opened up before him like a mouth. He whispered, "End of the road, girl. Let's finish it." The cab was filled with flame now. The windshield had started to melt around the edges. The steering wheel was too hot to touch for long. He aimed straight for the center of the crater, holding the line steady even as fire crawled across the hood. And then, through the noise, he heard it again. Jason's voice, faint, like memory. "You can still come home, Dad." He smiled through the smoke. "I am, kid. I am." He hit the last gear, floored it, and drove the Freightliner, burning, screaming, alive, straight into the mouth of the desert. The explosion lit the night for miles. The shockwave rolled across the sand like thunder. And then, silence. Only the wind and the stars blinking like they'd seen this kind of madness before. The world had gone silent. Then came the pain. When sound returned, it was a howl. Wind, fire, the echo of everything breaking at once. Mike Dalton opened his eyes to a sky that wasn't dark anymore. It burned orange, white, and red, like someone had set the heavens on fire. He was on his back, half buried in the gravel pit, ears ringing, lungs full of smoke. The freightliner was gone, or what was left of it burned in the center of the crater, a twisted skeleton of metal glowing hot as sunrise. He tried to move, but pain clawed through his chest. Ribs may be cracked. His right arm refused to lift. Everything smelled like melted wire and diesel. For a long while, he didn't move, just breathed. In, out, each breath like swallowing razors. Somewhere beyond the haze, the sound of sirens drifted, faint, far away, carried on the desert wind. He laughed weakly. "Too late, boys," he rasped. "Show's over." He rolled onto his side, teeth gritted, and dragged himself a few feet through the gravel. His skin was burned, his shirt half melted, but he didn't care. He wanted to see it. The truck, his old girl. One last time. When he finally raised his head, he saw it. The trailer was split open. Its metal sides peeled back like flower petals. Fire still danced along the edges, but it was dying now, losing its fury. And in the middle, at the very heart of the wreck, lay the container, or what used to be one. Cracked open but empty. No chemical cloud, no poison, just smoke. He blinked hard, eyes watering. "You did it, old man," he muttered. "You actually did it." His legs gave out, and he slumped back against the gravel, breathing shallow, each exhale a little weaker. Then, faint, impossible, a sound came from the wreckage. Buzz, buzz. His phone. He stared toward the cab. What was left of it, a burning husk 20 feet away. The sound came again, muffled but real. He didn't think. He crawled. Every inch was agony. Every movement peeled more skin. But he kept going, dragging himself hand over hand through the scorched sand until he reached the edge of the cab. The door was bent inward. Twisted from the blast, he shoved it with his shoulder, once, twice, until it gave just enough for him to reach inside. There it was, lying among melted plastic and shattered glass. The phone screen was cracked but glowing. He pressed the answer button with a shaking finger. "Yeah." "Dad?" Jason's voice, frantic. Mike closed his eyes. "Hey, kid." "Oh my God. You're alive. They said the truck exploded." "Yeah," Mike whispered, a weak smile cutting through the pain. "She went out with style. But I'm still here, sort of. Stay where you are." I'm coming. I'll find you." He coughed, a deep, wet sound. "No, son. Don't. There's nothing left to find. Just a broken trucker in a hole full of bad decisions." "Don't say that. You don't get to give up now." Mike stared at the horizon. The fire had dimmed. The stars were coming back, faint but steady. He could hear helicopters in the distance now, rescue or cleanup, or maybe just curious vultures in uniform. "I'm not giving up," he said softly. "I'm just parking for a bit." Jason's voice cracked. "I should have called you sooner." Mike smiled through the blood. "Nah, you called right on time." "Dad." "Listen," Mike interrupted. "If you ever get the chance, go drive west some night. Doesn't matter where. Just drive till the stars don't look like they belong to anyone. You'll know what I mean." "Dad, please." But he didn't let him finish. He wanted his son's last memory of him to be a voice still strong, not one fading into static. "You remember when you hit that home run in Little League?" he said, eyes fixed on the sky. "You looked for me in the stands. I wasn't there. I saw it later on video. Best damn swing I ever saw. I should have been there, kid. I'm sorry." Jason's reply came through tears. "It's okay, Dad. I know." The phone slipped from Mike's hand, landing softly in the dirt. He looked at the fire one last time. the dying embers of the truck that had carried his life from one failure to another, and somehow brought him here to this strange redemption. His vision blurred, but the pain was fading now, replaced by something like peace. He thought he heard footsteps, maybe real, maybe memory. Then a flashlight beam cut through the smoke, voices shouting, "Rescue crews, finally close enough." He smiled weakly. "Took you long enough." The wind blew across the crater, carrying ash and the faint smell of rain. For the first time in years, Mike Dalton didn't feel the need to keep driving. He closed his eyes and let the world go quiet again. When the first firefighter reached him, the old trucker was still breathing, barely, his hand resting on the melted steering wheel emblem he'd carried out of the wreck. The badge read, "Freightliner." And in the dirt beside him, glowing faintly in the starlight, lay the phone, its cracked screen still showing one name, Jason Dalton. The world returned in fragments, a ceiling light too bright, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the smell of antiseptic that clung to every breath. Mike Dalton came back from the dark, slowly, as if rising through thick water. His throat felt like sandpaper, his body a single pulsing ache. For a long time, he didn't know where he was. The last thing he remembered was the desert on fire, the steering wheel melting under his palms, and his son's voice breaking through the noise. Now, everything was white, cold, still. He turned his head, pain flared, but he saw a uniformed paramedic at the far side of the room. A hospital, maybe in Kingman or Flagstaff. Machines whispered and blinked beside him, counting what was left of his heartbeats. When the medic noticed he was awake, she smiled gently. "Welcome back, Mr. Dalton. You're in St. Mary's Hospital. You've been out for almost 2 days." He tried to speak, but his throat gave only a rasp. "Easy," she said, pouring water into a paper cup. "You inhaled a lot of smoke. Don't rush it." He took a sip, the cold water cutting through the dryness like mercy. "The truck?" Her expression softened. "Gone. What's left of it's being investigated by the state hazmat team. They said if that thing had gone off closer to a town, it would have wiped out half of Arizona." Mike exhaled slowly. His voice came out as a broken whisper. "Guess I picked the right ditch." The medic nodded. "You picked the right miracle, Mr. Dalton." When she left, he turned his head to the window. Morning light was spilling into the room, pale and quiet. The desert stretched beyond, endless, indifferent, beautiful. He lay there a long while, half awake, half listening to the hum of the machines. Then, a soft knock on the door. He thought it was another nurse. But when the door opened, everything inside him froze. Jason stood there. Older, taller, his jawline sharper. But those same eyes, that same mix of confusion and defiance that Mike remembered from the Little League photo. The boy had become a man, but the look was the same. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them held 10 years of silence, 10 years of words that should have been said, but weren't. Finally, Jason stepped closer. "You look like hell." Mike smiled weakly. "You should see the other guy." Jason laughed once, softly. The sound cracked, almost a sob. "They said you shouldn't have survived that." "Yeah, well," Mike muttered. "Truckers don't exactly retire easy." Jason pulled up a chair, sat down beside the bed. His hands fidgeted with a paper cup of coffee. "They told me you saved a whole county. They're calling you a hero on the news." Mike shook his head. Hero's a word people use when they don't know what else to call a fool who got lucky. Jason looked at him for a long moment, eyes glistening. "I watched that footage, Dad. You could have jumped out. You didn't. I had to see it through, Mike said. If I'd left that trailer, all of this would have been for nothing. Jason leaned forward, voice trembling. You didn't just save strangers out there. You saved me. You made me remember why I used to look up to you. The words hit harder than any explosion. Mike turned away, staring at the pale morning sky outside. I was never much of a father, kid. Always told myself the next load, the next check, the next run. That's when I'd fix things. By the time I looked up, the road had taken all the good years. Jason's voice broke. You think I care about that now? Silence filled the room. The only sound was the slow beep of the heart monitor and the wind rattling faintly against the hospital window. Jason stood, stepped closer, and placed his hand on Mike's shoulder. You came back, Dad. That's enough. Mike swallowed hard. He didn't trust his voice, so he just nodded. For the first time in years, the air between them felt simple, human. Then later that afternoon, reporters crowded the parking lot outside. Cameras, microphones, eager faces. The world had already turned his story into something larger. The fire trucker of Route 66. Inside, Mike refused every interview. He didn't want glory. He just wanted quiet. When the sun began to set, Jason came back into the room with 2 coffees and a look that wasn't quite awkward anymore. I talked to Mom, Jason said, handing him the cup. She's proud of you. Says you've got more lives than a cat. Mike chuckled softly. Tell her I'm down to my last one. Jason hesitated, then added, when you get out of here, maybe you can come stay with me. I've got space. You don't have to keep living out of that truck. For a long while, Mike said nothing. He just looked out the window, watching the sky go from orange to deep blue. I don't know how to be still, he said finally. All I've ever known is the road. Jason smiled faintly. Then we'll take it together. Doesn't matter where. Mike looked at his son, really looked, and for the first time in years, something inside him unclenched. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe it's time I learned to share the wheel. Outside, the horizon bled into night again. The last light caught the hills, the same hills that had burned just days ago, and turned them gold. For the first time in a lifetime, Mike Dalton didn't feel like he was running from anything. He was just waiting for morning. 3 weeks later, the desert had already begun to forget. The black scars in the sand had faded to rust and dust. The wreckage was gone, hauled away for study by men in suits who spoke in acronyms. On the news, Mike Dalton's story had become a montage. Heroic music, a photo of a truck burning in the night, a voiceover about courage in the face of disaster. Mike never watched it. He was out of the hospital by then, limping but alive. His skin still bore the burns, pale, cracked maps of where the fire had touched him. And the doctors said his lungs would never be the same. He didn't argue. He'd made peace with the road's toll. Now, sitting in the passenger seat of a rented pickup truck, he watched the horizon stretch endless ahead. Jason was at the wheel, both hands steady. They'd been driving for hours, no destination in mind, just miles, old and new, passing quietly beneath the tires. Feels strange sitting on this side, Mike said, voice rough but warmer now. Jason grinned. You're not in control, huh? Must be killing you. Mike chuckled. A little. He reached up and adjusted the air vent, a pointless old habit. But I'm learning. They passed through small desert towns, motels half lit, diners with one truck parked outside, gas stations where time seemed to have stopped. Every place looked like a memory Mike had already lived once. At a diner outside of Needles, California, they stopped for breakfast. The kind of place where the coffee pot never emptied, and the waitress called everyone Han. The waitress, gray hair, wide smile, poured their cups and said, "You two truckers?" Jason laughed. "He is. I'm just trying to keep up." She winked at Mike. "Well, he's got the look. The road don't ever wash off, does it?" Mike smiled faintly. "No, ma'am, it don't." They ate in silence after that. Bacon, eggs, black coffee. The kind of meal that tasted like forgiveness. When they got back in the truck, Jason started the engine but didn't shift yet. "So, what now? You going back to driving?" Mike stared out at the road. The heat shimmered in the distance. "Maybe someday. Smaller routes, maybe just local runs. But I think..." He paused, searching for words. "I think I need to figure out who I am without a truck first." Jason nodded. "That's a start." Mike reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded photograph, the one that had hung from his Freightliner's visor for all those years. The corners were singed now, edges blackened from the fire, but the image still survived. A little boy holding a baseball bat, frozen mid-grin. He handed it to Jason. "Kept this with me every mile." Jason looked at it, eyes softening. "You really carried it all this time?" "Yeah," Mike said. "Guess I wasn't ready to let go until now." Jason folded it carefully, slid it into his wallet. "Then I'll carry it for a while." For a long stretch of highway, they said nothing. The desert slid past, vast and bright, alive with the sound of wind and tires. As the sun dipped low, Jason glanced over. "You know, they still call you hero of Route 66. Got fan mail sent to Mom's house. People saying you saved their families, their towns." Mike smirked. "They don't know how close I came to blowing the whole state." "Doesn't matter," Jason said. "You did the right thing when it counted." Mike turned to look at his son, his voice low but steady. "Funny thing, kid. I spent 30 years running freight, and I thought I was hauling goods, metal, chemicals. Turns out, all that time, I was just hauling my own damn ghosts." Jason smiled, keeping his eyes on the road. "And you finally dropped the load." "Yeah," Mike said softly. "Guess I did." They drove until the stars came out, the same desert sky that had once burned now, calm and endless. Mike leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the hum of the tires. It was almost music, the kind of rhythm that only the road knew. When he opened his eyes again, Jason was singing along quietly to the radio. "Eagles, take it easy." Mike smiled, the corners of his mouth cracking into something that hadn't been there in years. He tapped the dashboard to the beat, then joined in, voice rough but sure. "Don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy." The two of them sang off-key, laughing between verses, the road stretching before them like a promise. And for the first time in forever, Mike Dalton didn't feel like he was running from something. He was heading toward something, maybe a future, maybe peace, maybe just another sunrise. But this time, he wasn't driving alone. The first light of morning bled across the Mojave, soft as breath. The sky turned from black to silver, then to gold. The highway ahead stretched empty, a ribbon of quiet promise leading west. Mike Dalton sat in the driver's seat again, hands steady on the wheel of a new Freightliner. Not his old battle-scarred girl, but a gleaming replacement Jason had insisted on renting. The dashboard still smelled of factory plastic and new beginnings. Beside him, Jason dozed against the window, his head tilted, sunlight brushing his face. Mike watched him for a moment, something warm and painful catching in his chest. "You snore like your mom," he said quietly, smiling to himself. Jason mumbled, half asleep. "That's genetic. You can't prove otherwise." Mike laughed, the sound breaking through the hum of the tires. They'd been on the road since before dawn, tracing the line between Arizona and California. There was no schedule, no deadline, just the road, the hum, the rhythm. Like a heartbeat he'd finally learned to listen to instead of outrun. The radio played softly, Johnny Cash this time, the low baritone filling the cab like a sermon from the road itself. Mike drummed his fingers on the wheel in time with the song. "Never thought I'd hear that voice again," he said. Jason yawned. "Guess even the stations out here still believe in ghosts." Mike smiled. "Maybe they do." By mid-morning, they'd stopped at a rest area outside Barstow, wide desert plains stretching forever. The kind of silence that reminded you how small you were. Mike climbed out slowly, his knees stiff, lungs still raw but healing. The desert wind hit him full in the face, dry, hot, honest. He walked a few yards away from the truck, boots crunching gravel, and looked out at the endless horizon. The fire scars from his last run were long gone now, washed away by rain and time. The world had moved on, as it always did. Jason joined him, 2 cups of gas station coffee in hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," Mike said, taking the cup. "Just thinking." "About what?" Mike looked out at the vast emptiness. "About how the road doesn't forgive, but it sure as hell gives you a second chance." Jason nodded, sipping his coffee. "You know, you could retire. Write a book. Dalton's Highway, How Not to Burn Down Arizona." Mike chuckled. "Yeah, sure, I can see it now. Bestseller right between cookbooks and self-help." Jason smiled. "You'd be surprised who'd read it." Mike leaned against the truck, looking at the reflection of the sun on the chrome. "Nah, the road's my book. I've been writing it my whole damn life. Just needed someone to finally read the last page with me." Jason turned to him. "You mean that?" "Every word." For a moment, they stood in silence, watching heat shimmer off the asphalt. Then Jason reached into the cab, pulled out a new photograph from the dash. He held it up, a simple Polaroid of the 2 of them, taken that morning at a diner, both grinning like fools, coffee cups raised in mock salute. "Thought you might need an upgrade for your visor," Jason said. Mike took it, staring at it longer than he meant to. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I do." He slid the photo into the sun visor, where the old one used to hang, and for a long while just looked at it. They hit the road again before noon. The highway climbed through the hills, then dropped toward the desert flats, where the sun shimmered on the horizon like a promise. As they drove, Jason leaned back, eyes closed, humming along to the radio. Mike glanced at him, then back at the road. The hum of the engine, the steady pull of the tires, the warmth of the sun through the windshield. It all felt right. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "You know, I always thought I was hauling freight. Turns out I was hauling myself. Took me 52 years to figure that out." Jason opened one eye, smirking. "And here I thought therapy was expensive." Mike laughed. "Cheaper on diesel." The 2 of them shared that laugh, real, deep, healing, the kind that didn't hide behind anything. The miles rolled on, and with each one, something heavy inside Mike grew lighter. The road no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a homecoming. At a long straightaway, where the desert opened up wide and free, Jason said, "All right, old man, your turn. Where to?" Mike thought about it, really thought. Then he smiled. "Anywhere that ain't burning." Jason grinned. "I'll take that as west." "West works," Mike said. He reached for the radio and turned it up. The Eagles again. Take it easy. The sound filled the cab, old and familiar. Mike's hand rested steady on the wheel. In the mirror, there was no smoke, no flame, no past chasing him anymore. Just sky, dust, and sunlight spilling ahead into forever. He smiled to himself, eyes on the road. "Let's roll." The Freightliner's engine growled low, and the two of them drove straight into the golden light of afternoon. A father and son, finally heading the same direction. And somewhere deep in the hum of the highway, in the whisper of wind against metal, the road seemed to say, "Welcome home, Dalton." Honor, thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support inspires new journeys and new stories to come.